The night was cold, colder than usual for December in New York City. Snowflakes drifted lazily from the sky, melting as they touched the wet pavement. The city buzzed faintly in the background, cars honking, distant footsteps echoing, and the occasional hum of a subway train rumbling beneath the surface. Matthew Carter tightened his scarf around his neck and quickened his pace. His leather shoes clicked sharply against the icy sidewalk as he moved away from the Grand Hotel, where the charity gala had just ended. Matthew didn't like attending events like this. He went because it was expected of someone in his position, but he always felt out of place among the smiling faces and polite chatter. Tonight had been no different. He had shaken hands, exchanged pleasantries, and written a generous check to the charity, all while feeling hollow inside. It wasn't that he didn't care about helping others. He did, in his own way. But these gatherings reminded him too much of what he had lost. His thoughts drifted to Lily, his daughter. She would be asleep by now, tucked into bed with her favorite stuffed bear clutched tightly in her arms. Matthew's chest tightened at the thought of her. Lily was 10 years old, with bright green eyes and a smile that could light up even the darkest room. But she hadn't smiled much lately. Not since the accident 2 years ago. The car crash that left her paralyzed from the waist down. It wasn't supposed to happen. Matthew had hired the best lawyers, sued the driver who caused the collision, and poured millions into medical treatments. None of it mattered. No amount of money or influence could fix what was broken. And so, Lily spent her days in a wheelchair, watching other kids run and play while Matthew watched her spirit slowly fade. He sighed heavily, shaking his head as if trying to clear the image of his daughter's sad face from his mind. As he turned a corner, something caught his eye, a figure huddled in the shadows of an alleyway. At first glance, it looked like one of the many homeless people who called the city streets home. But there was something different about this one. Something unusual. The figure sat cross-legged on the ground, wrapped in a dirty gray blanket. A cardboard sign lay beside him, scrawled with messy handwriting. Anything helps. Most people walked past without giving him a second look, but Matthew stopped. Maybe it was curiosity, maybe it was guilt, he wasn't sure. Whatever it was, he couldn't bring himself to walk away. As he approached, the figure looked up. It was a boy, no older than 16, with unkempt brown hair and piercing blue eyes that seemed far too sharp for someone living on the streets. His clothes were worn and patched together, but his expression was calm, almost serene. There was an intelligence in his gaze that didn't match his surroundings. "Evening," the boy said, his voice steady despite the chill in the air. Matthew hesitated before responding. "Evening." The boy tilted his head slightly, studying Matthew, with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. "You're rich," the boy stated matter-of-factly. Matthew raised an eyebrow. "What makes you say that?" The boy gestured vaguely toward Matthew's expensive coat and shiny shoes. "That, for starters. Plus, you've got that look about you, like you've spent your whole life getting what you want." Matthew frowned. "And what exactly do you think I want?" The boy didn't answer immediately. Instead, he reached into the folds of his blanket and pulled out something small and metallic. It gleamed faintly in the dim light of the street lamp. Matthew squinted, trying to make sense of it. It looked like some kind of gadget, sleek and futuristic, with tiny blinking lights embedded in its surface. "I can help you," the boy said suddenly, his tone serious. Matthew blinked, taken aback. "Help me with what?" The boy leaned forward, slightly, lowering his voice. "With your daughter." Matthew froze. How could this kid possibly know about Lily? Was it a coincidence, or had someone told him? Matthew's mind raced as suspicion began to creep in. "What are you talking about?" he demanded, his voice sharper than he intended. The boy didn't flinch. If anything, he seemed amused by Matthew's reaction. "Your daughter. She's paralyzed, right? From the waist down?" Matthew's heart pounded in his chest. This was impossible. Nobody knew about Lily unless they were close to him, and this boy was clearly not part of his world. "Who are you?" Matthew asked, his voice low and dangerous. "My name's Jake." the boy replied simply. And I'm telling you I can make her walk again. For a moment, Matthew didn't respond. He stared at Jake, searching for any sign of deceit or trickery. But the boy's expression remained calm and sincere. Against his better judgment, Matthew found himself intrigued. How? He asked finally, his voice barely above a whisper. Jake held up the strange device in his hand. This, he said, it's complicated, but it works. I've seen it work. Matthew shook his head, struggling to process what he was hearing. You're saying this thing can fix her legs? Jake nodded. Not fix, exactly. More like rewire her nerves. It's science, not magic, but yeah, it'll let her walk again. Matthew wanted to laugh. He wanted to walk away and forget this bizarre encounter ever happened. But deep down, a small part of him refused to dismiss it entirely. What if it was real? What if this scruffy kid actually had something that could change Lily's life? You're crazy, Matthew muttered, more to himself than to Jake. Maybe, Jake admitted with a shrug. But you don't have to believe me. Just ask yourself this. If I'm lying, what do I stand to gain? I'm sitting here in an alley, freezing, my butt off. If I wanted to scam you, I'd find an easier way. Matthew opened his mouth to argue, then closed it again. Jake had a point. Scammers usually targeted people with promises of wealth or fame, not miracle cures for personal tragedies. Still, Matthew couldn't shake the feeling that this was too good to be true. Why are you showing me this? Matthew asked after a long pause. Why not go to a hospital or sell it to some big company? Jake's expression darkened slightly. Because I don't trust them. Hospitals would take years to approve something like this, and big companies would twist it into something unrecognizable. I need someone who cares enough to do it right. Someone like you. Matthew felt a pang of guilt at those words. Did he really care enough? He had thrown money at every doctor and specialist he could find, but nothing had worked. Was he willing to risk hope on a stranger's promise? I don't even know you, Matthew said, his voice tinged with frustration. How am I supposed to trust you? Jake met his gaze steadily. You don't have to trust me. Trust her. Your daughter deserves a chance, doesn't she? The question hit Matthew like a punch to the gut. Of course Lily deserved a chance. She deserved everything. And yet, here he was, letting fear and doubt hold him back. Fine, Matthew said abruptly. I'll hear you out. But if this turns out to be some kind of trick... It won't, Jake interrupted firmly. I swear. Matthew nodded, though he still wasn't convinced. For now he decided to play along. After all, what did he have to lose? As they stood there in the shadowy alley surrounded by the quiet hum of the city, Matthew felt a flicker of something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. It was fragile, uncertain, and maybe even foolish. But it was there, lingering in the cold winter air like a spark waiting to ignite. Little did Matthew know, this chance encounter would change not only his daughter's life but his own as well. The next morning, Matthew woke up feeling uneasy. He replayed the events of the previous night over and over in his mind. The homeless boy named Jake, the strange metallic device, and the bold claim that it could help Lily walk again. It sounded impossible, like something out of a science fiction movie. Yet, despite his doubts, Matthew couldn't shake the tiny spark of hope that had ignited inside him. After getting dressed, he stood by the window of his penthouse apartment, staring out at the city below. His thoughts kept drifting back to Lily. She was the reason he worked so hard, the reason he pushed himself to build an empire from nothing. But lately, all his success felt meaningless when he saw her sitting in her wheelchair, staring wistfully at other kids playing outside. What good was money if it couldn't give her the one thing she wanted most, her freedom? Matthew sighed and made a decision. He grabbed his coat and headed back to the alley where he'd met Jake. To his surprise, the boy was still there, huddled under the same tattered blanket. This time, however, Jake didn't seem surprised to see him. I figured you'd come back, Jake said with a small smile as Matthew approached. Matthew ignored the comment and got straight to the point. I want to see proof. Real proof. If what you're saying is true, I need to know. Jake nodded, unfazed. Fair enough. But we can't do this here. We need somewhere private. Matthew hesitated. Letting a stranger into his home felt risky, but he knew there was no other way. Fine, come with me. They took a taxi to Matthew's penthouse, the contrast between their worlds becoming painfully obvious as they stepped into the sleek, modern apartment. Rachel, Matthew's ex-wife and Lily's mother, was already there. She looked up in surprise when she saw Jake, her brow furrowing in confusion. Who's this? She asked, glancing at Matthew. This is Jake, Matthew replied quickly. He might be able to help Lily. Rachel's eyes widened. Help her how? Before Matthew could answer, Jake stepped forward. I've been working on a device that repairs damaged nerves. It's experimental, but I think it could help Lily walk. Again, Rachel stared at him, her expression shifting from disbelief to cautious optimism. Are you serious? How does it work? Jake explained as best he could, using simple terms. He described how the device used electrical impulses to stimulate nerve regeneration, essentially rewiring the body's communication system. It wasn't magic, it was science, but even as he spoke, Matthew could see the skepticism in Rachel's eyes. And you expect us to believe this? Rachel asked sharply. You're just a kid living on the streets, why should we trust you? Jake didn't flinch. You don't have to trust me, just give me a chance to show you it works. Lily wheeled herself into the room, having heard the commotion. Her green eyes were wide with curiosity as she looked at Jake. Is it true? She asked softly. Can you really make me walk again? Jake knelt down so he was eye level with her. I think so, but it won't be easy. It'll take time and it might hurt. Are you okay with that? Lily nodded eagerly. I don't care if it hurts, I just want to try. Rachel exchanged a glance with Matthew, silently asking what he thought. Matthew shrugged. We don't have anything to lose, he said quietly. With that, Jake set to work. Matthew cleared out a corner of the living room and brought in a desk and some tools. Jake unpacked the device, revealing its intricate components. As he assembled it, he explained each part to Matthew and Rachel, who listened with a mix of fascination and doubt. Over the next few days, Jake became a temporary fixture in the Carter household. He spent hours tinkering with the device, making adjustments and running tests. Matthew observed him closely, trying to gauge whether the boy was genuine or just a clever con artist. Jake, for his part, remained focused and professional, treating the situation with a seriousness that belied his age. Lily, meanwhile, grew more attached to Jake with each passing day. She peppered him with questions about the device, about science, and about his life before ending up on the streets. Jake answered patiently, sharing bits and pieces of his story. He told her about growing up in foster care after his parents died in a fire, about discovering his passion for technology in a rundown library, and about the underground lab where he'd first learned about neural engineering. One evening, as they sat together in the living room, Lily asked, Why are you helping me? You don't even know me. Jake smiled faintly. Because I know what it's like to lose everything, and because I believe everyone deserves a second chance. His words struck a chord with Matthew, who had spent years burying his emotions beneath layers of ambition and control. Watching Jake interact with Lily reminded him of the kind of person he used to be, someone who cared deeply about others, not just himself. As the days turned into weeks, progress on the device began to show. Jake ran simulations, tested prototypes, and fine-tuned the settings until he was confident it was ready for a trial. Finally, one afternoon, he announced that they were ready to begin. This is it, Jake said, holding the device in his hands. It's not perfect, but it should work. Are you ready, Lily? Lily nodded, her heart racing with excitement and fear. Rachel helped her lie down on the couch while Jake carefully attached sensors to her legs and lower back. Matthew watched. Anxiously from the sidelines, his hands clenched into fists. Okay, Jake said, taking a deep breath. Here goes nothing. He activated the device and a soft hum filled the room. Tiny lights blinked rhythmically as the machine came to life. For several minutes, nothing happened. Then, slowly, Lily's toes began to twitch. Her eyes widened in amazement as she felt sensations she hadn't experienced in years. "It's working," she exclaimed, tears streaming down her face. "Rachel," gasped, covering her mouth with her hands. Even Matthew, who had tried so hard to remain detached, felt a lump rise in his throat. But the moment was short-lived. Suddenly, Lily cried out in pain, clutching her legs as spasms shot through her body. Jake quickly turned off the device, panic flashing across his face. "What happened?" Matthew demanded, rushing to Lily's side. Jake shook his head, looking frustrated. "I don't know. Something must have overloaded. I'll fix it, I promise." Lily managed a weak smile despite the pain. "It's okay." It still felt amazing. Her resilience amazed Matthew. He realized then that Lily's strength was far greater than his own. While he had let grief and guilt consume him, she had faced her challenges with courage and grace. That night, as Matthew lay awake in bed, he reflected on everything that had happened. Jake's invention was far from perfect, but it had given them a glimpse of hope, a reminder that miracles, no matter how small, were still possible. And for the first time in years, Matthew allowed himself to believe that maybe, just maybe, things could get better. Little did he know, the journey was only beginning. The days following Lily's first trial were tense. Jake worked tirelessly in Matthew's garage, which had been converted into a temporary lab. Tools, wires, and pieces of equipment covered every surface, creating a chaotic but functional workspace. The air buzzed with the hum of machines and the occasional spark from soldering irons. Jake spent hours hunched over the device, making adjustments and running tests, determined to fix whatever had gone wrong during Lily's initial session. Matthew watched him closely, pacing back and forth like a restless tiger. He wanted to believe in Jake's invention, but doubt gnawed at him constantly. What if it never worked? What if they were wasting their time chasing a dream that was impossible to achieve? Still, he couldn't bring himself to walk away. Not when Lily's laughter had returned, even if only for a brief moment. Rachel, on the other hand, seemed more patient. She visited the garage daily, bringing coffee and snacks for Jake and checking on his progress. Over time, she began to see glimpses of the person behind the scruffy exterior, a boy who carried the weight of tragedy yet refused to give up. One afternoon, as she handed him a cup of coffee, she asked softly, "Why are you doing this, Jake? Really?" Jake paused, holding the cup in both hands. "Because I've seen what happens when people lose hope," he said after a long silence. "My mom used to say that everyone deserves a second chance. Maybe this is mine." Rachel nodded, understanding more than she let on. She had seen the same despair in Matthew's eyes after the accident, the way he had shut down emotionally, retreating into his work instead of facing the pain. Watching Jake now reminded her of how powerful hope could be, even in the darkest moments. Meanwhile, Lily waited eagerly each day for updates. She spent hours reading about science and technology, fascinated by the idea that something so small could make such a big difference. When Jake finally announced that the device was ready for another trial, her excitement was palpable. This time, the family gathered in the living room, where Jake had set up the equipment. He explained the process carefully, warning them that progress would likely be slow and painful. "Nerve regeneration isn't easy," he said. "It's like teaching your body to do something it forgot how to do. But if we keep trying, I think it'll work." Lily nodded bravely, lying down on the couch as Jake attached the sensors once again. Matthew stood nearby, his jaw clenched, while Rachel held Lily's hand tightly. The room fell silent as Jake activated the device. For several minutes, nothing happened. Then slowly Lily's legs began to twitch. Her face scrunched up in discomfort, but she didn't cry out. Instead, she focused on the sensation, marveling at the strange tingling feeling spreading through her muscles. After 10 minutes, Jake turned off the machine, looking satisfied but cautious. "That was better," he said. "We're getting closer." Over the next few weeks, the trials continued. Each session brought new challenges. Some days, Lily experienced intense pain. Other days, the device malfunctioned or produced no noticeable effect. Through it all, Jake remained determined, tweaking the settings and refining the technology. Matthew grew increasingly impatient, questioning whether the effort was worth it. But Lily's resilience kept them going. One evening, after a particularly grueling session, Matthew confronted Jake in the garage. "How much longer is this going to take?" he demanded, his voice sharp with frustration. "Every day feels like a gamble. How do we know this isn't just some wild goose chase?" Jake looked up from his work, his expression calm but firm. "I can't promise you a timeline, Mr. Carter. All I can tell you is that I believe in this, and if you want to help Lily, you need to believe too." Matthew opened his mouth to argue, then stopped. He realized that Jake wasn't just talking about the device. He was talking about faith, about holding on to hope even when things seemed hopeless. It was a lesson Matthew desperately needed to learn. As the weeks turned into months, the family dynamic began to shift. Matthew started spending more time with Lily, helping her practice physical therapy exercises and encouraging her during the trials. Rachel noticed the change in him, seeing glimpses of the compassionate man she had fallen in love with years ago. Even Jake became part of their routine, sharing meals with them and telling stories about his childhood. Despite the progress, Jake knew the device still wasn't perfect. During one late-night conversation with Rachel, he admitted that it required constant monitoring and fine-tuning. "If I had access to better resources, a real lab, funding, experts, I could make it stable enough for everyday use," he said. "But right now it's too risky." Rachel frowned. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying this is only the beginning. If we want to help more people like Lily, we need to take this further. But I can't do it alone." Rachel understood what he was asking. She glanced toward the living room where Matthew sat reading a book. For the first time in years, he looked content, his guard lowered as he laughed at something Lily had said. Rachel smiled faintly, realizing that Jake's invention had done more than give Lily hope. It had brought their fractured family back together. The next morning, Rachel approached Matthew with Jake's proposal. At first, Matthew balked at the idea of investing millions into an unproven technology. But as he thought about it, he realized the potential impact it could have, not just for Lily, but for countless others suffering from similar injuries. Slowly, reluctantly, he agreed to help. With Matthew's resources, Jake was able to secure a proper lab space and hire a team of engineers and scientists to assist him. The transformation was remarkable. What had once been a jumble of wires and makeshift parts became a sleek, polished prototype, capable of functioning without constant supervision. Lily's progress accelerated rapidly under the improved device. She began taking her first shaky steps with the aid of crutches, then a walker. Each milestone filled the Carters with joy, but it also deepened their appreciation for Jake's determination and ingenuity. One evening, as the family celebrated another successful trial, Lily turned to Jake with a wide grin. "Thank you," she said simply, "for everything." Jake smiled back, though there was a hint of sadness in his eyes. "You're welcome, Lily. This is just the start." Unbeknownst to anyone, however, trouble was brewing on the horizon. Former members of the underground lab Jake had mentioned earlier had begun searching for him, intent on reclaiming the technology they believed belonged to them. As Jake worked tirelessly to perfect the device, he couldn't shake the feeling that their past was catching up with him, and it might put the Carters in danger. Little did they know the journey was far from over. The breakthrough came on a chilly spring evening. Jake had spent weeks refining the device, testing it repeatedly until he was confident it could function without constant monitoring. That night, as the Carters gathered in their living room, he announced that they were ready for the final trial. "This time," Jake said, holding up the sleek, updated version of the device, "we won't need any extra equipment, just Lily and the prototype." Lily's eyes sparkled with excitement. She had dreamed of this moment for so long, walking unaided, feeling the ground beneath her feet again. Matthew and Rachel exchanged nervous glances but nodded their approval. They trusted Jake now, more than they ever thought possible, Jake carefully attached the sensors to Lily's legs and lower back. He gave her a reassuring smile before activating the device. A soft hum filled the room as tiny lights blinked rhythmically. For a few moments, nothing happened. Then, slowly, Lily's muscles began to respond. Her toes twitched, then her calves tightened. She took a deep breath, focusing on the sensations coursing through her body. "Okay," Jake said gently. "Try standing." With Rachel's help, Lily pushed herself up from the couch. Her legs wobbled, but she managed to stay upright. Tears welled up in her eyes as she realized what was happening. She was standing on her own for the first time in years. Matthew held his breath, afraid to move or speak, as if the slightest sound might break the spell. "Can I walk?" Lily whispered, looking at Jake. Jake nodded. "Take it slow, one step at a time." Lily gripped the edge of the couch, her knuckles white with effort. Slowly, she lifted one foot and placed it forward, then the other. Step by step, she moved across the room, her movements shaky but determined. When she reached the far wall, she turned around, her face glowing with joy. "I did it!" she exclaimed, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I'm walking." Rachel burst into tears, hugging Lily tightly. Even Matthew, who prided himself on staying composed, couldn't hold back his emotions. He wiped away a tear as he watched his daughter take another step, then another. It was a miracle, a real, tangible miracle, and it had happened right before their eyes. But the celebration was short-lived. Later that night, as Jake packed up his tools in the garage, he noticed something unusual. A black sedan was parked. Outside the building, its engine idling. Two men in dark suits stood near the entrance, watching the house intently. Jake's heart sank. He recognized them immediately. They were former members of the underground lab he had fled months ago. Panic surged through him, but he forced himself to stay calm. He grabbed his phone and called Matthew. "We've got trouble," he said. "Urgently. Some people are here, they're looking for me." Matthew rushed to the garage, his expression grim. "Who are they?" "They used to work with me," Jake explained quickly. "They think I stole the device. If they find out about Lily, they'll come after her too." Matthew's jaw tightened. He wasn't about to let anyone threaten his family. "What do we do?" "We need to get Lily out of here," Jake said, "and we need to make sure they don't follow us." Within minutes, the Carters sprang into action. Rachel helped Lily pack a small bag while Matthew called his driver, instructing him to bring the car around to the back entrance. Jake stayed behind, keeping watch on the intruders. As the family slipped out unnoticed, Jake confronted the men in the alley. "What do you want?" Jake demanded, stepping into the light. One of the men smirked. "Cut the act, kid. You know why we're here. Hand over the prototype and maybe we'll let you walk away." Jake shook his head. "You can't have it. It doesn't belong to you anymore." The second man stepped forward menacingly. "You don't understand, this isn't a negotiation." Before they could grab him, Matthew appeared behind them, his voice cold and commanding. "Leave him alone." The men turned, surprised to see the millionaire standing there. "This doesn't concern you, Mr. Carter," one of them said. "Stay out of it." "It concerns me when it involves my family," Matthew shot back. "Now get out of here before I call the police." The men hesitated, clearly weighing their options. Finally, they backed off, disappearing into the shadows. But Jake knew this wasn't the end. They would be back. That night, the Carters retreated to a safe house owned by Matthew. It was a secluded cabin nestled deep in the woods, far from prying eyes. As they settled in, Jake explained everything: the illegal experiments, the collapse of the lab, and the dangerous people who wanted to exploit the technology for profit. Matthew listened silently, his mind racing. He had always believed in protecting his wealth and influence, but now he saw the bigger picture. "We can't let them win," he said firmly. "Not after everything we've been through." Rachel nodded in agreement. "We need to make this legal. Secure patents, get the government involved. Whatever it takes." Jake looked at them gratefully. "Thank you, but it won't be easy. These people are powerful, and they'll stop at Nothing to get what they want. We'll fight them, Matthew said, his voice unwavering. Together. Over the next few days, the Carters worked tirelessly to safeguard the invention. Matthew hired a team of lawyers to file patents and secure intellectual property rights. He also reached out to trusted contacts in the medical field, enlisting their support to legitimize the technology. Meanwhile, Jake continued to refine the prototype, ensuring it was ready for clinical trials. Lily adapted quickly to her newfound mobility, practicing walking every day with the help of the device. Her laughter echoed through the cabin, filling it with warmth and hope. For the first time in years, the Carters felt like a real family again, but the threat loomed large. Jake often stayed awake late at night, staring out the window, wondering when the men would return. He knew they wouldn't give up easily. Still, he refused to let fear consume him. The Carters had given him a second chance, and he was determined to protect them no matter what. One evening, as the sun set over the forest, Matthew joined Jake on the porch. "You saved my daughter's life," he said quietly. "I'll never forget that." Jake shrugged. "I didn't do it alone. You all helped me believe in myself again." Matthew smiled faintly. "Maybe we saved each other." As they sat in silence, watching the stars appear one by one, both men knew the road ahead would be difficult. But they also knew they weren't alone. Together they had faced impossible odds, and together they would keep fighting for a better future. The battle for the device's future began in earnest. Matthew knew they couldn't fight the former lab members alone. They needed the law on their side. With his resources and connections, he hired the best lawyers in New York to file patents and secure legal ownership of the technology. Jake provided detailed documentation of his work, proving that the invention was his creation. It wasn't easy. There were loopholes, technicalities, and constant threats, but Matthew refused to back down. The first step was to take the case to court. Matthew argued that the device was not only Jake's intellectual property, but also a medical breakthrough that could change lives. He presented evidence of its success with Lily, showing videos of her walking again after years of paralysis. The courtroom was packed, with reporters scribbling notes and cameras flashing outside. For once, Matthew didn't mind the attention. It was a chance to show the world what they had achieved. On the other side, the men from the underground lab fought fiercely to reclaim the technology. They claimed it belonged to them, citing old contracts and agreements Jake had signed as a teenager. Their lawyers painted him as a thief, accusing him of stealing company secrets. But Jake stood firm, his voice steady as he explained how the lab had abandoned ethical practices and forced him to leave. "I didn't steal anything," Jake said during his testimony. "I saved this project because no one else would. I wanted to use it to help people, not exploit them." The turning point came when Lily took the stand. Though she was nervous, her courage shone through as she described what it felt like to walk again thanks to the device. "Before, I thought I'd never be able to run or play like other kids," she said softly, clutching her crutches. "But now I can, and it's all because of Jake." Her words struck a chord with everyone in the room, even the judge, who nodded thoughtfully. By the end of the trial, public opinion had shifted in their favor. News outlets hailed the device as a miracle invention, and support poured in from families whose loved ones suffered from similar injuries. The pressure mounted on the opposing side until finally, they withdrew their claims. When the verdict came in, the courtroom erupted in cheers. The device was officially declared Jake's property, protected under patent law. Matthew shook Jake's hand, relief washing over him. "We did it," he said, his voice thick with emotion. Jake smiled, though his expression was bittersweet. This is just the beginning. With the legal battle won, the next step was preparing the device for widespread use. Matthew invested heavily in setting up a research facility dedicated to refining the technology and conducting clinical trials. Jake worked closely with a team of scientists and engineers, ensuring the device was safe and effective for others. Progress was slow but steady, and soon they began testing it on patients with spinal cord injuries. Lily became the face of the project, sharing her story to inspire hope in others. She attended press conferences and charity events, always accompanied by Jake, who remained humble despite the growing recognition. "It's not about me," he often said. "It's about helping people who need it most." But even as things improved, shadows from the past lingered. The men from the underground lab hadn't disappeared completely. Though they couldn't legally challenge the device anymore, they tried to sabotage the project in other ways, spreading rumors, hacking into systems, and threatening anyone involved. Matthew responded by hiring top cybersecurity experts to protect their data and increasing security around the facility. One night, as Jake walked home from the lab, he noticed someone following him. His heart raced as he quickened his pace, ducking into a nearby alley to lose them. Just as he thought he was safe, a hand grabbed his shoulder, spinning him around. It was one of the men from the lab, his face twisted with anger. "You think you've won?" the man growled. "You're messing with forces you don't understand." Jake clenched his fists, refusing to show fear. "Leave me alone, you've already lost." The man smirked. "We'll see about that." Before he could say more, headlights illuminated the alley. Matthew's car screeched to a halt, and the Millionaire stepped out, his presence commanding. "Back off," he warned, his voice icy, "or I'll make sure you regret it." The man hesitated, then backed away, disappearing into the darkness. Jake let out a shaky breath, grateful for Matthew's timing. "They're not going to stop," he said quietly. "They will," Matthew replied firmly. "I promise." Back at the safe house, the Carters discussed their next move. Rachel suggested going public with everything, their struggles, the threats, and the lengths they'd gone to protect the device. "People deserve to know the truth," she said. "If we expose them, maybe they'll back off for good." Matthew agreed, and together, they organized a press conference. Surrounded by cameras and reporters, Matthew spoke candidly about the challenges they'd faced. "This isn't just about us," he said. "It's about making sure groundbreaking technology like this reaches those who need it without being controlled by greed or corruption." Jake added his own message, appealing directly to the former lab members. "If you're watching this, please stop. This device has the power to save lives. Don't let your pride ruin that." The press conference made headlines worldwide, drawing widespread support for the Carters and Jake. Embarrassed and exposed, the men from the lab finally retreated, unable to withstand the scrutiny. Though the threat wasn't entirely gone, the immediate danger had passed. As life returned to normal, or as close to normal as it could be, Matthew reflected on how much had changed. He had started this journey as a man consumed by guilt and regret, but along the way he had rediscovered what truly mattered: family, compassion, and purpose. Rachel noticed the change too, seeing glimpses of the man she had fallen in love with years ago. Even Lily seemed happier, her laughter echoing through the house once more. For Jake, the experience was transformative. He had come a long way from the scruffy homeless boy Matthew had met in that alley months ago. Now he had a home, a mission, and a newfound sense of belonging. As he watched Lily practice walking in the backyard, her movements growing stronger, each day, he felt a deep sense of fulfillment. "We did it," Rachel said one evening, joining Jake on the porch. "Against all odds, we made it happen." Jake nodded, smiling faintly. "Yeah, but there's still so much more to do." Rachel placed a hand on his shoulder. "And we'll do it together." In the distance, the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The road ahead wouldn't always be easy, but for the first time in a long time, they faced it with hope, and with each other. Little did they know, their journey was far from over. Months passed, and the device became a symbol of hope for countless families around the world. Clinical trials proved its effectiveness, and soon, it was approved for widespread use. Hospitals began offering treatments to patients with spinal cord injuries, giving them the chance to walk again. News stories featured tearful reunions and triumphant first steps, each one a testament to Jake's invention and the Carters' determination to make it accessible to everyone. For Matthew, the success of the project brought more than just professional pride. It gave him a renewed sense of purpose. He had spent years chasing wealth and power, but now he understood that true fulfillment came from helping others. His relationship with Rachel improved dramatically. They started spending more time together, rebuilding the connection they had, lost after Lily's accident. Even though they were no longer married, they found a new kind of partnership, one built on mutual respect and shared goals. Lily thrived under the care and attention of her parents. With the device fully integrated into her daily routine, she regained not only her mobility but also her confidence. She joined a local soccer team, something she had dreamed of doing since she was a child. On weekends, she practiced tirelessly, determined to catch up with her peers. Her laughter echoed through the house once more, filling it with warmth and life. Jake, too, found his place in the world. Matthew helped him enroll in college, where he studied biotechnology and engineering. During breaks, he continued working at the research facility, refining the device and exploring new applications for the technology. Though he still lived modestly, he was content, knowing that his work was making a difference. One crisp autumn morning, the Carters decided to celebrate their journey by taking a trip to Central Park. It was a rare moment of calm amidst their busy lives, a chance to reflect on how far they had come. As they strolled along the winding paths, Lily ran ahead, her movements fluid and graceful. Watching her race toward the playground, Matthew felt a lump rise in his throat. "She's amazing," Rachel said softly, smiling as she watched her daughter climb onto the swings. "I can't believe how far she's come." Matthew nodded, his eyes glistening. None of this would have been possible without Jake. They turned to thank him, but Jake was already slipping away. He stood near the edge of the path, his hands shoved into the pockets of his hoodie. "You don't have to say goodbye," he said with a small smile. "I'll always be grateful for what you've done for me." Rachel stepped forward, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You're part of our family now, Jake. Don't forget that." Jake hesitated, then nodded. "Thank you for everything." As the Carters gathered around Lily, Jake quietly slipped away, disappearing into the crowd. He didn't want fanfare or gratitude. He simply wanted to know that he had made a difference. Walking through the park, he thought about his own journey, the hardships, the sacrifices, and the moments of triumph. For the first time in his life, he felt at peace. Meanwhile, the Carters sat on a bench, watching Lily play. Matthew wrapped an arm around Rachel's shoulders, pulling her close. "We did it," he said softly. "Against all odds, we gave her a second chance. And ourselves too," Rachel added, leaning into him. "This whole experience changed us for the better." Lily ran back to them, her face flushed with excitement. "Can we come here every weekend?" she asked, grinning. "It's so much fun." Matthew laughed, ruffling her hair. "Of course, sweetheart. Whatever makes you happy." As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting golden light over the park, the Carters stayed a little longer, savoring the moment. They knew there would be challenges ahead. Life was unpredictable after all, but they faced them with courage and unity. Together, they had overcome impossible odds, proving that even in the darkest times, hope could light the way. Elsewhere in the city, Jake wandered through the streets, feeling lighter than he had in years. He paused at a quiet corner, pulling out the prototype device he had kept as a memento. It was battered and worn, a reminder of where it all began. Smiling faintly, he tucked it back into his pocket and kept walking, ready to embrace whatever the future held. In the end, the story wasn't just about a miraculous invention or a billionaire's redemption. It was about second chances. For Lily, it was the chance to walk again. For Matthew, it was the chance to reconnect with his family and rediscover his humanity. For Jake, it was the chance to turn tragedy into triumph and inspire others to do the same. And as the city buzzed around them, alive with endless possibilities, they knew one thing for certain. Life, like the seasons, moved forward. And with hope, resilience, and love, anything was possible.